Why I love retro British TV. Hello there, and welcome to the latest in my occasional Why I Love series. This time around I'm talking about my love for good old retro British telly, and why I love it so. Because you're old, I hear you say. You cheeky little cunt, why don't you fuck off back to your cot, you bloody whippersnapper. Anyway, I digress. Now there are a couple of very definitely retro non-British shows that I love, like, of course, Soap, which I've talked about on my channel around a million times, and the Canadian-German mid-80s TV show version of The Little Vampire, which I've mentioned almost as often. But there's not that many, and this time I really want to focus primarily on retro British TV anyway. So there. Now some of these retro shows I am indeed old enough to have grown up with, and never even really went away. Robin of Sherwood is one such example. Loved this sword and sorcery fantasy adventure series in the early to mid-80s as a kid, and started getting them on VHS in the late 80s and have since upgraded to DVD and even Blu-ray now. Then there are other shows that I grew up watching and loving, which I kind of lost touch with for a little while. The likes of Sherlock Holmes with Jeremy Brett, and the Joan Hickson Miss Marple mysteries, both beautiful, unsurpassed adaptations of those classic stories with peerless leads, and both of which kind of disappeared from my viewing when I came to Australia in the early 90s and never had on VHS. However, I picked them up on DVD in the early-ish 2000s, so they've once again been a fairly regular part of my viewing schedule for a fair while now. And the same applies to stuff like Blackadder and The Young Ones as well. Indeed, has classic cop show The Bill. Does The Bill count as retro yet? I mean, technically it didn't end until 2010, although it died in spirit in the early 2000s, and my fandom is pretty much primarily for the 80s and 90s stuff. It's a rather alarming thought that 90s TV counts as retro now, but there you go. As with say Robin of Sherwood, though, The Bill never really went away for me for long. I ditched the modern version of it with the 2002 season, which was 2003 in Aussie Zealand. And it was only 2 years later, 2005, that the DVD releases started, and have been watching and rewatching the 1984 to 2001 seasons ever since. The Avengers is another great retro classic, of course, and one which I stumbled onto in the mid-90s on video. However, it's in the last 5 years that I've really started to not just rediscover some real retro shows but also find retro British TV treasures that are completely new to me. That process started in 2014 with Callan. I've done a full video on this elsewhere, so I'll not ramble on about it too much. But this awesome late 60s and early 70s gritty British spy thriller series was a show I'd heard about, and remember my parents watching in the early 80s, but I'd never watched it. And I fell in love with it so damn hard that it made me want to look into what other great British TV retro goodies I was missing out on. In the last few years I've unearthed the likes of tongue-in-cheek murder mystery panel show Whodunit, the genuinely great early 70s comedy series Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads, which as with Callan I'd heard of but never actually seen, and late 70s and early 80s spy show The Sandbaggers. That latter I got into after another run-through of another classic retro show, the P.D. James Mysteries, featuring the character of Adam Dalgliesh, which fell into the Miss Marple and Sherlock Holmes category for me, and wanted to see if the great Roy Marsden had done anything else I was unaware of. And the process is continuing. I have just the last few weeks started watching the late 70s drama series Secret Army, which is set in Nazi-occupied France in World War II and focuses on the activities of a particular French resistance cell. I'm only 3 episodes into the first season as yet, but it's absolutely cracking stuff so far. And I have just renewed my acquaintance with a couple of retro 70s comedy series I haven't seen in decades in the form of The Good Life and Some Mothers Do Aveum. Great stuff. And I've sent off for a few other things, including another mid-70s World War II drama series called Colditz, which looks like it has a killer cast including David McCallum, Edward Hardwicke, aka Dr. Watson from the Brett Holmes, and the great Anthony Valentine. Why do I love retro British TV? A few reasons, I suppose. Purely frivolously, 70s and 80s TV is entirely free of the kind of PC SJW horseshit that seemingly no TV show, and certainly none produced by the modern Bolshevik brainwashing corporation, can be free of in today's world. That's refreshing for a start. There's nostalgia, of course. The older you get, and the further away your childhood becomes, the more important it becomes to claw back as much of it as you can. But the other and probably biggest reason? Frankly, I just think most of it is better. The drama series in particular may lack the glib, widescreen attention deficit slickness of today's TV, but by God are they better written and usually better acted to boot. For those of you watching this who know full well that classic Doctor Who is a massively superior show to its lame as fuck modern equivalent, well, the same is pretty much true for most British TV drama then versus now. Perhaps that's what this modern obsession with rewriting and insulting the past is really all about. Today's generation of hacks knowing full well that they can't match the quality of their predecessors' work on actual merit. Yeah, sounds about right to me. I love my retro British TV. I cannot get enough of it.